Shabbat shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
So, does anybody in here, aside from me, watch Top Chef? Nobody? Nobody? Really? Okay. Well, Eli. Thanks, Eli. That's why he does the cooking at Temple with the school. Excellent. So, I like Top Chef. No, I do not cook like a Top Chef, but I enjoy watching it. I get very into the drama of it all. Plus, they make beautiful creations. So, I'm a little behind, but I'm watching Top Chef season 20. Yes, there are 20. And if you didn't know, there are competitions all around the world of Top Chef. There's Top Chef Canada, there's Top Chef Germany, there's Top Chef Mexico, in Italy. There's even a Top Chef Middle East, North Africa. I had no idea until I started watching Top Chef All-Star World, because they have All-Star America seasons. This is Top Chef World All-Star season. So I was watching an episode earlier this week where they had to put together a dish that was an optical illusion of some sort. And for anybody who have seen those kinds of, their meals or some sort of something, a food that looks like something else that it is not. So for example, is anybody here seen a cake that looks like a baseball hat? And you might even think that it's a baseball hat until you cut it down the middle and realize it's a cake and not a baseball hat. They had to make something that looked like something else, but was really food. So one of the congregants, he's not a congregant, he's a contestant. One of the contestants who had been a winner of Top Chef Mexico decided to make a sponge. Not like a cake sponge, but like a Scotch-Brite sponge that you clean your dishes with. So he made this beautiful creation that was a brioche and lamb tartare, and it was topped by a bunch of herbs that were crusty, like crispy looking, so that it looked like that green top of a sponge. You know what we're talking about? And then splattered Parmesan sauce to look like dirty dishwater on the plate, and presented this to a panel of really esteemed judges and like Michelin star level chefs. So you might think to yourself, if I was cooking for Michelin star chefs, I might think of what is the most elegant and beautiful looking presentation. He did not. He went with a sponge and dirty dishwater to present to these people. But the thing is the why here, because it's always about the why. Because cooking, like so many other things, is an art form. And the more personal you get with a form of art, the more beautiful and meaningful and usually wonderful it is. And so the reason that he chose a sponge and dirty dishwater was because of his background. He came from a place in Mexico that was a violent neighborhood, and the kitchen and cooking literally saved his life, he said. And he started working in a kitchen, he said at age 8 or 9, as a dishwasher. And so his story of being a dishwasher in this restaurant that then led him to being elevated and moving on and learning his love for cooking is what led him to where he is. That was his origin story. Everything about who he is as a chef today goes back to this origin story and this core foundational memory that really leads him through the rest of his life. And so as I was watching that, it really got me thinking about my stories and the stories we tell about ourselves and the stories that we tell about our communities. And so as I was looking at the Torah portion this week, I, of course, saw that connection, and I wanted to share with you a little bit about that. So I'm going to ask Cantor to share a little bit of our text. So we are in Parshat Ki Tavo, and the text that Moses shares is some of his final words to the Israelite people, because remember, we're only 4 Torah portions away from the end of Torah. He chose to share this text. Here's, "My father was a wandering Aramean. He went down to Egypt with meager numbers and sojourned there, but he became a great and very populous nation. The Egyptians dealt harshly with us and oppressed us. They imposed heavy labor upon us. We cried out to Adonai, the God of our ancestors, and Adonai heard our plea and saw our misery and our oppression. Adonai freed us from Egypt by a mighty hand, by an outstretched arm and awesome power, and by signs and portents, bringing us to this place and giving us this land, a land flowing with milk and honey. So as I was reading this section, first of all, does it sound familiar to anybody? Yeah. Because this text, this specific one, is one that we read at our Passover Seders. We say, as part of our Passover Seder every year, we gather around a table and we say, my father was a wandering Aramean, and we tell the story of the escape from Egypt. But this story, which we're reading about at the end of Deuteronomy, is mentioned and is the thread that's woven through so much of our Torah. Does anybody happen to know how many times it mentions that we were strangers in the land of Egypt in our Torah? 36, exactly right. 36 times. There are so many things in our Torah. There are so many different lessons. There's lessons about ritual, and there's lessons about how we interact with other people, and there's lessons about how we treat property, and there's holidays. But the thing that is mentioned more than anything else in Torah, 36 times, is this story. Because this is our foundational origin story. This is the core of who we are as a people. There are so many different pieces about why it is our story, because it's a story of who we are. It's a story of wandering and growing, a story about what it means to be free and to also be in community. It's a story about what it means to find ourselves desperate and suffering and crying out to God for something, anything, to alleviate our collective pain. It's a story that reminds us what it means to have faith and to trust ourselves and our leaders and also to God. And it's a story about what it means to be in relationship with sometimes imperfect human beings and to still choose to be on that journey together. And above all, it's a story that reminds us that because we know what it's like to be strangers in a foreign land, because we've walked that journey and we felt the sting of being unwelcome and unwanted and having the pain of persecution, we can do no less than become a people who embody unbridled, radical inclusivity and audacious hospitality. It's a reminder that wherever we are, wherever we find ourselves in the world, in our lives, that this is a humble beginning, that we were once slaves, and that everything we do comes from that story. And so as I was thinking about this origin story for who we are and what we do in the world as a Jewish people, it helped me to think about how that relates to our lives as individuals, because we have individual stories and also a collective story. And so we are in the month of Elul. We sang Achat Sha'alti at the beginning of our service. We just transitioned to our high holiday Amidah, and next weekend is Slichot. I know, it's very scary, but it's coming. We are transitioning to this time where we pause and we reflect and we think about our own stories. So as we go into this time of reflection, I'd like you to take a moment and consider some questions. What is your story? What is the story that you tell about yourself, about your family? What does it say about you? What does it say about your values? Does that story help you become the best version of yourself? And where does Judaism and our collective Jewish story weave into your personal story? And then I want us to take some time between now and when we come together for Slichot and for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur during this time of reflection to ask ourselves if whether the stories we're telling are the stories we want to be telling. And if they're not, that this is the time to course correct, to find the time to revisit those stories and make sure that as we go forward into the next year, that the thread that weaves through our lives that continues to be the foundation that we stand on is the story we want to be telling. Shabbat Shalom.
continue now with the words of Aleinu. We invite all those who so choose to rise in body and or in spirit as we face the ark together.
Shabbat